America's love for the Second Amendment. Any call to repeal or change it, it is met with fierce opposition from the NRA, Washington's power chambers, even the American public. Right after the Texas shooting, this is what President Joe Biden had to say about the Second Amendment.
Second Amendment is not absolute. When it was passed, you couldn't own a cannon. You couldn't own certain kinds of weapons. It's just always been limitations.
Now, Biden says the Second Amendment is not absolute. The president's comments drew intense criticism almost immediately. Both conservatives, gun rights activists slammed him. They said the Second Amendment cannot be infringed. This is what the Second Amendment says. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The primary aim of the Second Amendment was to prevent the United States from starting a professional army. In fact, it was the single most important goal of the Second Amendment. This is difficult to imagine today. The United States has one of the largest armies in the world. Another important fact here is that it was never concerned with individual rights. It's not like the founding fathers were against the idea of an individual right to bear arms. It's just that it was not an issue that concerned them at the time. So while the gun rights lobby cites the Second Amendment to justify gun laws, the fact is the Second Amendment never really cared about individual rights. So the argument that the Second Amendment is sacrosanct, it's flawed. America's founding fathers had a vision that armed citizens are ultimate guarantors of freedom. But that has now become the reason behind America's gun problem. Thank you so much for staying with us, Dr. Dvoskin. Is there any way gun reform laws can be brought about without violating the Second Amendment laws?
Some of the ways to do it are relatively simple suggestions that do not interfere with the Second Amendment right to bear arms. For example, causing a 3-day delay when you have to buy a gun means that if someone is suicidal and they can run out and get a gun in 30 minutes, the chances that they're going to die is much higher. If they're suicidal and it takes them 3 days to get their gun, in 3 days, most people are not still suicidal. They think of other ways to end their pain. Another example are the red flag laws, where if police come to a home, often for a domestic violence call, and there are threats, death threats or threats of violence, and the police say, you know what, maybe we'll take your guns for a few days. And a week later, the person can get their guns back. Now you've allowed time for the situation to cool down, and it doesn't work in all cases, but it might work in some. And so those are simple suggestions that would respect the right to bear arms. Another one is to make sure that everybody has to have a background check before they buy a gun, and to take some of the loopholes away. And that means that anybody who's a legitimate gun owner will pass the background check and they'll buy their guns. It won't be any restriction whatsoever on their right to own guns, but it may prevent somebody who would fail a background check from getting a gun at a gun sale or in a private sale.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.